into our next session now. I would like to introduce the plenary session, which is being run by a group of people. I was asked with Lorraine, who's Deputy Chair for the theme, to do this session, and oh, how naive we thought. It doesn't make sense to do it without students. And I know this is not a PC thing to say at the Enhancement Themes Conference, but I've learned over many years of teaching, never work with animals, children or technology. Being led by a group of students is beginning to seem like one of these criteria. Boy, have they pushed us out of our box, and we have learned a lot, to take risks, whether it's with technology or with format or whatever it might be. So I would like to introduce my co-presenters, who have been great fun to work with. First of all, we've got Dr. Lorraine Anderson, who is Assistant Director of Student Services and Head of the Centre for the Enhancement of Academic Skills, Teaching, Learning and Employability at the University of Dundee, and who is Deputy Chair of the Theme Leaders Group. We have Mikey O'Donnell at the end there, and Mikey is Vice President Education at the University of Strathclyde Students Association, and he's a member of the Enhancement Themes Student Network and of the Theme Leaders Group. Michael Stevenson is Student President at Glasgow Caledonian University and member of the Enhancement Themes Student Network, the Theme Leaders Group and Chic. And Dawn Hollis is finishing her PhD in History at the University of St Andrews and is a member of the Enhancement Theme Student Network. So we have lots of very dynamic people who are going to be running this session. Michael, can I hand over to you now?
Thank you very much indeed. I'm not quite sure which ones we were, the children, animals or the technology. Before we start, we know this is an afternoon session and often after lunch it gets a little bit tiring, so you'll see behind us up on the board here, we've tried to make this session as interactive as possible, and it's been great actually just watching through that last session just to see some of the comments coming through. But if you've got a active smartphone or a device that you can go on, if you just go to www.slido.com, while you're looking for those bits and pieces, I'm sure you'll be able to find on there a little box that says enter your code, and you're looking to enter enhancements on there. And during the session, we'll be having questions, and it will automatically update so you can go forwards. One of the things that we're asking at the moment is to really give us a bit of an idea around what the enhancement themes have done for us as a sector. Now, I'm sure a lot of you over the last couple of weeks have been eagerly awaiting the white paper. I know we have as students, and I have to say we were flabbergasted. We were, as a student network, sat discussing this earlier, and we were, wow, this is the answer. I think what the Teaching Excellence Framework is really going to do is provide us with a way forwards that will allow us as students to be able to fully understand what is going forwards and how to make a selection about the institution we want to go to. I think that it's something that as a sector we look forward to seeing happening. And I think it's really important that at this stage we take that moment to reflect and discuss what the enhancement themes have ever done for us.
Funding.
Okay, funding.
Funding student projects.
Okay, that's true. That's fair enough. Funding for international projects.
Flexible curriculum toolkit.
Oh yeah, that was helpful.
Okay, all right. So funding, the flexible curriculum toolkit are two things the enhancement themes have done for us. But I think on the
list of graduate attributes for the 21st century.
Okay, so obviously that goes without saying, all right? So we've got, apart from funding, the toolkit, the list of graduate attributes.
Support for staff and students.
Engagement, empowerment.
Yeah, that's something we'd really miss if we didn't have the enhancement themes.
Okay, all right. Apart from funding, flex and curriculum, the toolkit, the graduate attributes, the support staff for staff and students, the engagement, the empowerment. What have the enhancement themes done for us? I mean, let's be...
They would be annual enhancement themes conference.
Okay, that's it. Forget it, right? On a serious note, I think it's one of the things that we really ought to reflect on, and something that as we go forwards, we ought to be proud of as a sector, that what we have really pushed forwards is a world-leading way of looking at how we do enhancement, both here in Scotland but around the globe. One of the things that we've been doing particularly with this transition, and I'm really pleased to see students right at the middle there, because the last time we did that it was missing and in a corner somewhere, is to be able to map what a transition looks like. And I think some of the work that we've been seeing in the keynotes and across the different sessions so far has been reflecting that journey over the last 2 years. So looking forward from that, and I'm sorry I missed a slide here, so I'll just skip straight through that one. We've started to see all your case studies appearing across the sector and been able to visualise that to see what transitions mean to you in your different institutions, but also to what they can mean to us as students. And we've moved on this year from placing them into a wide area of categories to being able to visualise that a wee bit clearer and be able to make an opportunity for us to be able to see what that means as a sector, but also where those different stepping stones are. One of the things as a student network we wanted to do this year was to be able to have a look and see, well, what did transitions mean for students? How did they interpret them? And how did they see their journeys through this kind of map? So it gives me a pleasure to hand over to Dawn Hollis, who's going to talk us a little bit through what students said and what that meant for them.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to be presenting some of the results of a survey on student perspectives of transition. And this was one of 2 projects that was run by the QAA Student Network, which is made up of student representatives from around the country over the last academic year. Now, the aim of the survey was to do a bit of a health check on the theme of student transitions. We were wondering, firstly, whether or not students perceive transitions in the same way that institutions do. And also wondering if they were aware of the kind of support that was being offered to them. And the survey was also responding to recent conversations within the theme regarding student resilience and student management of their own transitions. And we were interested in seeing what we could glean of students' implicit ideas about where responsibility for smoothing transitions lay. Did they see it as something that was within their own power, or if it was something the university and institution had control over? And this is going to be a very brief overview of the survey results and some of the reflections prompted by it. If I successfully manage my own transition from being a PhD student to being a completed PhD student in a timely fashion, then there will also be a full report deposited with the QAA, hopefully by the end of the summer. So our first question, we just wanted to ease students into the language of transitions throughout the survey. As though the term is obvious to everyone in this room, it arguably has the tang of official jargon when we talk about it with students. So as we did use the term transition in the survey, we also drew upon phrases such as the student journey or referred to specific challenges to help set the term in more everyday or familiar language. And we eased them in with a picture round. So we asked them which of the 4 images currently on the screen best represented the student journey to them. And so we're just going to try out this Socrates clever sort of question technology and see what your responses to the same question would be. So if you go to Slido, and if you hopefully should have it up, or you have the forms in front of you, just look at these pictures and think which represents either the student journeys you see students going through in your institutions, or the journey that you yourself experienced as a student. And we'll just have a few fingers on the buzzer. Go.
Just want to see how many of you are using the Socrates.
It's not working.
Hands up, so it's in the screen.
It's not working.
If you're not, and you still want to respond, and you find short questionnaire on your seat, you can fill in the answers to the question there and have it at the end.
Okay, so that is a pretty overwhelming vote in favour of... There we go, in favour of B, which is all the different lines. Interestingly, the majority of students answering the survey the majority of the students answering the survey voted for the mountain picture rather than the audience opinion of the dash picture. And I found this quite telling because, of course, a mountain is something you climb it, it's one big challenge, you get to the summit and then you sort of come down the other side, which is quite different from our sort of vision of transitions as being this multi-layered, multi-dimensional thing with multiple different layers and transitions happening at the same time. So probably in terms of the sector perception of transitions, what you all chose is closest to that. So, the second set of questions that we asked introduced students to the idea of transitions as challenges or stages that they might have to work through. And participants were asked to identify the biggest personal and the biggest academic transitions they had to go through and what institutional support was available to help them manage those transitions. And interestingly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, given everything we've heard so far today, the answers to these questions completely conflated the personal and the academic. So to have to undertake paid work during their course was seen as an academic transition, having trouble understanding the mark scheme or having issues with the marks they're receiving was a personal transition. These things are totally, as we heard just earlier, multidimensional and totally interconnected in the way they're perceived. The survey also included several other lines of questioning. Participants were asked whether they belonged to any specific group that the transition themes are focused upon, such as mature students, international students or college leavers. They were also asked how stressful they found university as a whole. Somewhat depressingly, 42% identified it as often stressful, sometimes pleasant. They were also encouraged to identify a specific transition challenge and to talk about how they've been supported by the university or how they wish they'd been supported. And the final question we asked threw the transitions ball into their court, asking them how, having taken the survey, they would now define the term student transitions. And we received a range of really thoughtful answers. So student transitions involved discovery about oneself and learning about the world. They were challenging but rewarding, the process by which an individual adapts to and becomes integrated into an academic community. Each transition is dynamic and unique. And I found these definitions really one of the most interesting parts of the results. I was very impressed with the level at which students were willing to engage with the terminology of student transitions. And I think this is indicative of the potential that student engagement has to bring in terms of insights to complex matters that are being formally discussed at a sector level. And before handing over, I'm just going to highlight 3 key reflections that came out of the survey answers. So one more student's definition of transitions summarised them as the changes in life a student faces and how they react to them. And I think this definition intersects very closely with the recent focus on the theme of resilience and students' management of their own transitions. A transition is not something that happens to a student as a passive actor in the transition, something they're actively engaged with and can proactively respond to. And the current theme has already done so much to develop programmes, workshops, schemes and structures to ensure that students receive institutional and sector-wide support as they experience their key transitions. And the value of these sorts of developments should not be underestimated. However, to reference a previous theme, the graduate attributes that we aspire to for our Scottish graduates include the ability to independently overcome the challenges that they face. I think the aim of this theme, at least as I interpret it, isn't to give our students a fish and let them eat for a day. We want to equip them with the tools to manage their student transitions so that they can successfully transition for life. And it seemed from the responses that currently students' perception of their own agency in managing their transitions fell onto a spectrum. At one end, there are students who highlighted problems that I think many people involved in higher education would see as an important and formative element of the university environment. So one student identified the biggest academic transition as having less contact hours and much less pressure from tutors and lecturers to get work and readings done, and suggested as a solution that it would be better if it was obligatory to have to hand in reading notes or summaries every week to the tutors. Other students raised concerns about having multiple deadlines at once or several exams over the course of only a few days during the exam period. And obviously, these are genuine challenges that our students face. But from the point of view of a university teacher, these aren't necessarily challenges we want to remove or ameliorate. These are things that we want them to learn their life skills from. Transitioning through these things is something we want them to do, not just vanish these transitions. And at the other end of the scale sits another respondent who said they could identify no difficult academic transitions at all, as it was all fairly effortless. When they were asked to define what a student transition was, they said, "I wouldn't." So this is an example of a very confident, very resilient student, but also one who doesn't anticipate or expect any challenges happening to them. And in some ways, they are as unprepared as the hyper-dependent students for unexpectedly difficult transitions. And it seems that in terms of developing resilience, university should be aiming for a golden mean, such as one student who commented that their personal challenge was finding the ideal work-life balance within university, but when asked to suggest a solution, concluded that this is more a personal development issue. So the students in the middle of the spectrum don't necessarily reject or ignore the help available, but they're perhaps more inclined to go seek it out or find it within themselves than expecting it to be given to them. And I don't know if this might be a useful reflection around the themes of resilience. So the transitions map, this is sort of in terms of how we visualise transitions. The transitions map presents a student journey as a fairly stadial one, into higher education, through the different stages of it, and then out of it. However, some of the responses received made me reconsider the timing and frequency of transitions in and out of the university environment. So, on the one hand, several students raised what could be described as extraordinary or unanticipated transitions out of higher education, such as bereavement or illness. And many of them emphasised the difficulties involved in readjusting and reintegrated when they returned to their studies. On the other hand, we also have what could be termed as regular micro-transitions out of the university environment, such as non-academic paid employment or family commitments. Such responsibilities see students mentally and emotionally transitioning out and then back into higher education on a regular basis. And obviously these sorts of transitions are much more difficult to provide targeted support for than other types of transitions. For example, the transition between sub-honours and honours relates to a single and specific cohort at any one time, whereas bereaved students, working students and ill students are scattered throughout institutions at various levels and in various schools. However, this means it's also possible for student individuals to fall through the cracks, or for a postgraduate student in history to receive very different informal support from first-year undergraduate in mathematics. It may be that these types of micro or unexpected transitions are deserving of further consideration as we go on in the final year of the theme. And finally, just one very brief point. As we said at the start, we partly want to see if students are recognising all of the work going on in order to support student transitions. And there are just two interesting examples that came up that I want to mention. So several students said that they would like to see a peer mentoring system in place at their university to help them settle in both personally and academically. And I dug down into this data to see what university these students were at. And they were almost all of them at the University of St Andrews, which has a very long and very famously established parenting scheme, whereby incoming undergraduates are matched with parents and siblings to welcome them into uni. This is a whole part of the first year culture, raisin weekend, the whole lot. So, there's this support that's there, but they're not recognising it as support. On the other hand, when we asked students to identify themselves with any specific groups, a lot of these respondents were international students. And several students at Glasgow Caledonian emphasised how valuable they found the international student support services, highlighting the specific schemes and events, such as day trips that were run for them in settling into university. And these are both great schemes, both hugely helpful, and both bring people together. However, one is specific and targeted and advertises itself as the International Student Support Service, whereas the other one is general for all students and apparently seen as a fun add-on. And maybe going forward, the key question will be ensuring not only that students know about transition support, but they know that it is transition support. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Don. So that was what the students have been telling us about their transitions throughout of university in Scotland. What we're going to look at now is what we have heard from the external objective, we hope, evaluation that was done recently on the second year of the theme, to return to that idea of what have the enhancement themes ever done for us. Report carried out by researchers at the University of Dundee, which will be available for general circulation very shortly. But a couple of key messages from it. Impact. What have the enhancement themes done for us, or what has this one done? And what it has done, I think, is a really difficult thing to measure, and yet we all know that it's there. It's that atmosphere of trust between institutions, and we often say it is exclusive and unique to Scotland. We do not get it anywhere else. Some of the comments were there's a culture of exchanging ideas, and I think we're getting much better at doing that and finding practical ways of sharing our practices. It smooths over the different mission groups. I think the spelling mistake is mine. The sector is a good place to work together. So these are all really important things for those of us who work in the Scottish sector, that not only are we seeing projects coming through, conversations between colleagues, exchange of ideas between universities like they're happening today, but there are all these intangible cultural developments which have become very important to us. However, the last point is it is still patchy. So we're not doing it perfectly, and we've got some people who are very aware of all of this, some who are less. Another finding from the evaluation report relates to the number of people involved in this enhancement theme, much wider than previously. And the finding was there's something for everyone. There's good attendance at events, more applications for project funds, and some extremely high quality applications at that. And there is increased awareness of what is the student transition experience in our institutions. But again, there's a caveat. We still need to go further in improving institution-wide engagement with the staff and students in all of our institutions. Now, I know this is a bit dense text-wise, but this is your opportunity to give some thought to where you think the last year of the theme should go. So what do you think we might want to focus on? Should we be thinking about facilitating institutional change? In other words, how do we improve student transitions? How do we get that happening? Should we be making student transitions more of our mainstream institutional business? Are we looking for concrete outputs? Might be briefing papers, for example. Or D, are we looking for interactive web-based resources like toolkits? Are we looking for something that will help us to define what real impact looks like? Or do we simply want more discipline work? Do we want to see transitions focusing in on our subject area? G, the option is, do we want more equality and diversity work? And these have all come up out of the report as things that we may want to think about. Or do we just want to move seamlessly into the next theme without spending too much more time on student transitions? So, are they voting, Michael? Yeah. They are. Has everybody voted who wants to? If you haven't got your phone, you can write it on your little A5 handout and we'll collect them in at the end. If there's something that you think we should be doing that isn't in this list, write it on the back of your A5 handout and we will collect that at the end. So let's have a look and see what you're telling us. Alt-tab. I knew I wouldn't manage the technology. I knew it. Okay, so here's what you've said, that we should be aiming to facilitate institutional change, followed by some concrete outputs, followed by web-based resources. Are you just voting in order of A, B, C, D, E? Are you doing it like students fill in the NSS? Okay, but that's interesting for us to take away, that you seem to be saying that helping institutions to bring about this change is a really important part of what we need to continue doing on the theme. So if you have further comments or other ideas, do write them on the back of your handouts. I will now hand you over, once I've sorted the technology, I'll now hand you over to Lorraine, who again will be drawing on the evaluation report.
Right, okay, so these are all our little micro transitions and we're all just doing a short piece. It's interesting there that you were talking about the institutional importance and also that Trevor earlier this morning spoke about transition being required of institutions as much as it is of students. And the institutions and the institutional environment, the context, is what I'm going to talk about now. And I'm also going to talk about pixie dust, but we'll get to that in a minute. The feedback through the evaluation talked about the theme challenging institutions to think differently. And we know that the work in the institutions, that the institutional work has been the focus of the last couple of years for this theme, and that a lot of work has gone on, both within institutions and across institutions, and also through the institutional teams, many members of which will be in the audience today. The feedback also told us, jumping down a little bit, that everybody's got a role to play in transitions. And this was coming through a lot in everything that we heard, everything that people were speaking about. It was seen as a very relevant theme, that it was capturing core business, that everyone, students, academic staff, professional services staff, all have a role to play. But okay, so much, you know all this already, I'm sure you do. So let's have a think about the pixie dust. And this is coming to what institutions are actually doing. So what are they doing? I was very interested to see that a lot of institutions have created specific roles for individuals around the theme work, whether that's internships or specific institutional team roles. And I thought that was a really interesting and useful development. We also know that institutions are holding events for their staff and for other staff to come and join in, which is great. And I know that Edinburgh has been running an event for the last couple of years that I've tried to get to every year and haven't yet. So I hope you're going to run it again, Nicola, wherever you are, so I can get to it next year. We also know that a lot of work is going on in terms of the curriculum cycle, if you like, that the ideas around the theme are feeding into curriculum review and development. And we also know there's lots of projects going on and lots of resources being developed. And hence the pixie dust. Because one of the quotes that we got from the feedback from the evaluation is that people want to see the theme scattering pixie dust across everybody, just a little bit on everyone's head. Well, the QA officers going around with their pixie dust, so that everyone gets touched by it, if you like. It's not concentrated in particular areas. However, having said that, that's all the positive stuff, but there are some things to think about. And one of those is that we did get some concerns about whether this is a sustainable way of working, and that perhaps we are creating enclaves of practice that aren't being shared as widely as they might be. That there might be a bit of a theory-practice gap, that people are saying one thing, that they love the themes, they love the idea of student transitions, but it isn't being fully embedded in their work. So that's a little bit of a challenge there as well. Collaborative conversations is something that's also been a bit of a challenge. We're collaborating here today. Collaboration can take lots of forms, and perhaps we've been a bit too loose in our interpretation of what collaboration is. Because although we have collaborations and collaborative conversations taking place, perhaps at the institutional level, that's too high level for it. Ronnie and I were speaking earlier today and thinking, when we're sitting in these lightning talks in particular, individuals are saying, that's great, I love what you're saying, I'd love to work with you on that. And perhaps it's at that individual level that we're needing to support more collaborative activity. So collaborative work, sustainability of the themes, these are still issues. And these are my questions to help us think about that. So what's the best way to ensure sustainability of our institutional work? Is it more sharing and good practice events, the kind of things we're doing today? Is it more focus on embedding practice? And if so, of course, how do we do that effectively? Is it more collaborative working across institutions, or perhaps down at that individual level? Or, and this is where we want ideas from you, do we need to think differently about sustainability? Are we doing, Michael? Good. Oh, right. Okay. Right. Greater focus on embedding practice. Okay. Oh, it's moving around there. Oh, thinking differently is coming up. Oh. I had my money on thinking differently, so help me here, help me. Okay. Greater focus on embedding practice. Okay, that's really useful to know. But of course, the next thing is we'll come back to you and say, how are we going to do that? So please write your ideas on the back of your bit of paper and we can capture those later. Oops, yeah, I knew I'd do something wrong there. There we go. Okay. I'll move on now to my pixie dust. I'll hand over to Mikey.
So I'm going to talk about the kind of student viewpoint that came out of the Dundee report, which I colloquially call it. First things first, we've been talking a lot about engagement. As you can see, only 73 people took part in the whole report and the whole collection of data, and only 12 of them were students. I could have made it sound better by saying 16.4%, but I thought I'd let you know exactly. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because, as you can see, even though it was only 12 people, they have basically came out with the same sort of references that we've seen throughout the rest of the day from our other speakers. The idea of different types of transitions, different levels, and a phrase that me and Michael are used to as sabbatical officers, different hats. So looking at things from a different perspective, just based on whether you're a club captain, maybe a member of club and society, or as just a general student, or perhaps a deputy student, etc. So, funny enough, now moving on to engagement, and we wanted to see what the people who did respond to the report thought, and it was kind of funny, because as you can see, the staff thought student engagement was higher than students did, and as we can see, students aren't engaged that much because only 12 people filled out the survey. But again, the funny thing is, on the flip side, for staff engagement, so it must be that students recognise that a lot of students are engaged and staff recognise a lot of staff aren't engaged. So I think that's something we can work on as a whole next year. But institutional engagement does seem to be relatively high, ranking out of 6. Both of them are relatively good, just below 5 for staff and just above 5 for students. Moving on to support, we asked how well, or the report asked how well are you undertaking and undertaking the activities related to the enhancement theme. And again, we see the trend that staff rate the support higher from peers than students do, because I believe it's because students aren't getting that much support because we aren't being engaged with on a grand scheme. But because we're working with the QA a lot, we see a lot of support from the QA, and because you might be a student intern working with the university, or you might be on the institutional team, so you will see a lot of support coming from that. And something else I would say is that there should be student members on the institutional team at every institution, and we've heard reports that doesn't happen, so that these scores will only go up if everyone is engaging and supporting the student members and making sure that the student voice is being heard. So we've heard a couple of the challenges that has come from the earlier talks. Again, the major one is improving engagement. The minute we do that, more people will be answering questionnaires, more people will be engaged, more people will be taking part in these surveys, and we'll actually have statistically significant data. I am reading Twitter. I have seen a couple of tweets saying that some things are not statistically significant, and I completely agree. Some areas are more covered than others, so perhaps maybe looking at equality and diversity, or individual student perspectives and student transitions. We can just throw up general themes. However, we need to drill down and get a viewpoint from individuals and see the minor differences. Sustainability was a major thing that came out throughout the whole of the report. It's great we do these 3-year themes, but what do we do to ensure that they don't collect dust when we're finished with them? How do we ensure that they're actually being used throughout? How can we look back in 10 years and say the student transitions theme is actually still being used, or how did it move us from A to B? As long as we can do that, we know it's sustainable and we will all feel the benefits of it. And the elephant in the room, which Michael so sarcastically was enthusiastic about at first, TEF. We actually don't really know what impact TEF is going to have on the enhancement themes. We don't know what it's going to have on our QAA. We don't know what it's going to do to the quality enhancement framework. I know that BIS and University of Scotland have had a lot of chats around this. I know that universities all Scottish universities are already been taken into consideration for TEF 1. There will be an opt-out for TEF 2. I'm not sure the sector is moving towards that, but hopefully we will be able to find something that works for the Scottish sector. Quality enhancement, quality insurance are good things, but we need a Scottish-based system that covers that. So, as with everyone else, I have a lot of questions for you guys, and because it's based on my presentation, this can be really embarrassing. So, has your perception of the student perspective changed after hearing this presentation? Oh. You can't change the votes. This is looking remarkable like the referendum might. Like, if you vote not really, it means you're voting leave, right? So just stop, like. I'm calling it there. So I will now pass back to Ronnie for final remarks on the future. Thank you very much.